Today, we're going to jump right in and start talking about how to take control over your speech. How to take control over your speech. Now, one of the important things that we're going to be looking at today is something that we call proactive thinking, proactive speaking. You may hear me refer to it more as proactive speaking. But proactive speaking has really two aspects to it. One is how we think, and the second one is how we think. Right? One's how we speak, and one's how we think, or one's how we think, and one's how we speak, whichever way you want to look at it. But there's two aspects to it. And the reason that we say that is that speaking is not just about the mechanics of talking, right? Using our mouth and our vocal cords and breathing. It also has a lot to do with how we think, yes? So, because you know that when you're feeling confident, when you're feeling good, when you're feeling happy, when you're feeling hopeful, you tend to speak better. When you're feeling frustrated, or when you think you're going to stutter, when you think you're going to get stuck, you tend to get stuck. So it has a lot to do with how we think, yes? And that's why today we're going to look at really the first part of proactive speaking, which is proactive thinking. So let's talk about this word proactive. What do I mean when I say proactive? Well, it's a word that I coined with regards to speaking. It's a word that I coined to contrast reactive thinking and reactive speaking. And what do I mean by that? Well, often people feel like they're being controlled by their own speech, like they have no control over it. So they feel like when they get stuck, when they stutter, when they do these what they believe to be involuntary movements of the face, the mouth, the eyes, the body, they feel like they're out of control. When they want to say something, they want to make a phone call, they want to introduce themselves, they want to respond in class or in a workshop, and they feel like they can't do it, like their throat literally just closes up and nothing comes out. Or when they're repeating, they just feel like they're out of control. This is not true. This is not true. And I know some of you may get upset with me and say, well, what do you mean it's not true? It's not something I want to do. I try to stop doing it, but I can't. Okay, I understand that. The fact of the matter is that in many instances, in most instances, if you just try to stop it right then and there, it's not going to work. However, it's not what you do in the moment that really counts. It's what you do leading up to the moment that counts. So, if you do certain things, right, or if you don't do certain things, if you make yourself aware of how you're speaking and what you're doing, and you remind yourself to do certain things, and we go into this in the Pro 90D speech system. We talk about this. We also talk about it a lot in the ABCs course, which is absolutely free. But if you do certain things every moment, every day, what you find is that you actually do have control over your speech. You do have control over those, what you thought to be involuntary movements, okay? But if you just try to tell yourself in the moment, okay, I'm not going to do this, it's probably not going to work. So there are some things that you need to be doing each and every day, each and every moment, to gain control over your speech. And we call this proactive speaking because you're doing something beforehand. You're not just waiting until it happens and then reacting to it. Oh, I'm in this situation and now I want to say something but I can't. Or I really don't want to speak like this but there's nothing I can do. So you just are reacting to situations as opposed to what? Being more proactive, doing something about it beforehand. Right? Proactivity beforehand. So that's what we mean by proactive. It is taking action in advance, taking action before the situation occurs. Right? And not just taking action once, but taking repeated action, which gives you greater and greater control. Now, this will all make sense to you if you read the entire book, and if you go through the ABC's course and the Pro 90D speech system. This will just make a lot of sense what I'm saying. Hopefully it's making sense now as well. So, to summarize what I've said so far, when you're a proactive speaker and a proactive thinker, which is what we're going to focus on today, you don't wait for things to happen. You don't wait for situations to occur and then try to respond then. What you do is you begin taking action moment by moment, day by day, week by week, month by month. Begin taking action that ultimately puts you in control. Okay? So, let's now look at proactive thinking. Proactive thinking. And I'm going to give you some very specific examples of proactive thinking and at least one or two specific actions that you can take as a result of watching this. So let me start off with an example of proactive thinking. But first I want to give you an image to picture. I want you to picture waves, right? Waves. Have you ever seen a wave that just stopped? It just froze. Like, there's a wave, it's moving along, it's cresting, it's going up, it's coming down, and then it just stops. Let's say the wave comes up against a rock or a wall, or it comes up against a boat, and it just freezes, it stops, doesn't go anywhere. No, you're not going to see that unless it's ice. And if it's ice, then it's not a wave any longer, right? A wave is going to find a way to go where it wants to go. Okay? It's not just going to stop. It's either going to go left, right. It's going to go over. It can go through. It might go under. It might come back and build and come back again, but it's just not going to stop. So I want you to think of your speech as a wave, right? As a wave. And I often describe it that way when we talk about inflecting or inflections. In fact, if you were to measure the sound waves, you would see a wave pattern. So think about your speech as a wave. Think about your speech as having highs and lows. Think about it as having momentum, force, and power, because it does. Okay? Think about it as having impact. Think about your speech and speaking also, though, as finding a way to say what you want to say. That no matter what, you're not just going to stop. You're not just going to run into a word or a phrase and just stop. I can't say it. You're going to find a way to say what you want to say. That's proactive thinking. Proactive thinking says, my goal is to communicate whatever it is. It's to ask, it's to introduce myself, it's to answer a question, it's to ask a question. That's my goal. So if I have to figure out different ways of doing that, I'm going to do it. As long as these different ways don't cause me a great degree of stress, as long as I don't have to think of 1,000 different things. Let me give an example. Some people go through life and they have become very good at it, and changing words and switching how they want to say something, right? So this is the way that they now communicate. People who have stuttered or people who stutter or get stuck, they change the words, they switch words, they completely change how they want to say it. And so their mind is constantly going, and it gives them a headache, and they're tired at the end of the day from having to do this, all of these mental acrobatics. We don't want you to have to do that. However, one of the transitional strategies that we use is if you have to, for example, add a word in front of something, or occasionally change the way you're going to say something, right? Switching the word, switching the whole thing around. Occasionally. And I don't necessarily teach this as a permanent long-term tool, but occasionally, if you have to do it, do it. Because the goal is for you to communicate what you need to communicate, right? So it's like a wave. The wave is not going to just stop and go, I can't say this, so I'm just going to stop. The wave says, I can't go this way, I'm going to go this way. If I can't say it this way, I'm going to say it this way. but I'm going to say what I need to say, and I'm going to say it smoothly. I'm going to keep on moving. And the more you begin to think like that, the freer you're going to feel. Now, let me double back a little bit and say this. If you're using my approach, the Pro 90D speech system or the proactive speaking system, you're going to be creating a new way of thinking and a new way of speaking, okay, which is going to replace your old speaking style. So a part of this proactive thinking says, I need to create a new way of thinking, not try to fix the old way, not try to just, well, I can't say this, so let me just try to figure out how to say it. No, we have to create a new way of thinking and speaking. So by doing this, what's happening is you're becoming like that wave. And you're saying, okay, if I need to create a new way of speaking, then while I'm transitioning to this, because this new way of thinking and speaking doesn't just happen overnight, it takes time. So while I'm transitioning, while I'm transforming, how do I speak right now? You know, what if I need to make a phone call now? What if I need to introduce myself or order something or explain something? What do I do now? So while I'm practicing, while I'm doing these things, I need a way to do it now. So some of the specific techniques that I teach, and I'm going to give you an example now, are things like this. There's a young lady, one of my first clients years ago. She needed to get a job, right? And she couldn't get a job because she could barely make it through the phone calls for setting up the interviews. If she did make it through the phone call and get into the interview, she often couldn't make it past the receptionist when they asked her her name. And if she made it past the receptionist, she couldn't make it through the interview itself. So she barely wanted to go out shopping. She would sometimes ask her husband to do it, ask him to make phone calls and so forth. And we started to work together, and we worked together for a while, for several months. And so she started to arrange for interviews, okay, because her speech had improved. It wasn't quite where she wanted it, but it had improved. So she just started doing interviews. And she made it through the phone call, and then she went in. And I told her, I said, okay, one of the first things that will probably happen is that they're going to ask you your name. So how are you going to say your name? So she said, okay, I'll say my name like this. So I said, make sure that you say something like, yes, my name is, whatever. So I'm just going to use my name. Yes, my name is Michael Williams. Yes, it's nice to meet you. My name is Michael Williams. Thank you. My name is Michael Williams. So in other words, you hear me saying something before I say my name. The key to this is what we call airflow linking. I'm not stopping. Yes, my name is Michael Williams. I'm not saying yes, my name is Michael Williams, or yes, my name is Michael Williams. I'm saying it almost in one breath. Yes, my name is Michael Williams. Notice that it's called airflow linking. It's normal speech, right? But I call it airflow linking because you're linking the words together and you're maintaining a constant airflow. Now, this is a way of thinking, and I'll tell you why. Because what she did, she went in and she just tried to say her name. What's your name? And she just tried to say her name. Didn't come out. Why? Because the situation had changed. She could do it with me. She could probably do it with her husband. But when she went into that situation, which was different, the stressors were greater, right? Couldn't say it. Couldn't make it past receptionist. So I asked her, I said, how did you try to say your name? She said, well, I just tried to say my name. I said, there you go. You got to use those introductory words and phrases, and you got to link them together to say your name. And practice this over and over. Practice saying your name like that. She did it, went back, made it past the receptionist, got into the interview, and got a little nervous and got stuck there. Didn't go so well. Okay, no problem, but she did it, so she got kind of used to it. Okay, I didn't do as well as I'd like, right? I got nervous, but I did it. At least I made it. At least I tried. So she kept doing it. She went just scheduling interviews. She went back. And sooner or later, it didn't take her a really long time. It didn't take her really a long time, but she eventually got a job and did well. I think she has her own business now. But what she did, those subsequent times, is she introduced herself with the introductory words. Now, why is this proactive thinking, because that's what I said we would talk about today. It seemed like we were talking about speaking techniques, but actually it's a way of thinking. Why? Flexibility. Some people are not flexible. So we're going to call this a principle of flexibility. You'll hear me talk about this in some new programs that I have that are coming out. But the principle of flexibility, it says, and this is not just regarding speech, the more flexible you are, that is, the more options you have, the more flexible you are. The more flexible you are, the freer you feel, the freer you are. Let me say that again. There's many different ways to say this. You are flexible to the degree that you have more options. Right? The more options you have, the more ways of saying something you have, the more flexible you are, the freer you feel. And the freer you feel, right, the less stressed and anxious you feel, because you're like, you know what? If I can't say it this way, I can say it this way, or I can say it this way or this way. And often just that knowledge gives you confidence and makes you feel more relaxed and allows you to say whatever it is that you want to say. Does that make sense? So when you don't feel like you're stuck, like there's one option, like the wave that goes and just stops, there's no waves really do that, right? So if you think of yourself like a wave and that you're going to find a way, if you have to go this way, this way, this way, this way, you're going to find a way. If you double back a little, come forward, you're going to find a way to say what you need to say, and that gives you confidence, and that confidence makes you feel more relaxed and often allows you to say whatever you want to say anyway without having to change or add anything. Okay? So, the example is when introducing yourself or saying your name, you add something in front of it. Now, some people say, I've tried it, Michael, it doesn't work. Absolutely does work. I've been doing it for decades. I teach people, and I do it now just out of habit. I don't have to do it, and sometimes I don't do it. I just say my name, but I just like saying something introductory. But I've taught other people, and they use it, and it works. Now, this is when it doesn't work. When they don't airflow link it. When they say, my name is, and then they stop, they're right back to where they started. You have to airflow link it. You also, in most cases, in many cases, may have to inflect. My name is Michael Williams. So you may have to say your name a little differently. My name is Michael Williams. So changing the way you say something is a part of proactive thinking and speaking. Right? Changing the way you say it. So if someone says, I don't want to have to change the way, I don't want to have to add anything, then you're going to be stuck. And it doesn't mean you have to change it for the rest of your life. It just means you have to change it now while you're creating this new speaking style. Remember the wave. It doesn't say, well, you know, this rock is in the way, this boat's in the way, and this is the way I want to go, so I'm just going to stop. Right? No. It says, okay, it just goes around, it goes over, it goes under, it just keeps going. Doesn't even think about it, doesn't even bother him. So, during the times when I've had to do this, didn't even think about it, just said it and kept going, right? Didn't get a headache, didn't feel anything, maybe spoke 99% smoothly the whole time, just one time I have to change something around, just change it and keep going. Proactive thinking, principle of flexibility. Another principle that I want you to think about is this principle of control. We kind of already talked about this. Principle of control says that I can control how I speak if I'm willing to do the work beforehand, right? So you might say, well, there's certain things that I can't control right now. That may be true. That may be true. But if you do something beforehand, every minute, every day, every week, every month, you will ultimately gain control over your speech. Right? It's a principle. It's a principle. You can't try to do it the last minute. You have to do it each and every day, which is why I say you have to practice your new speaking style, the one that you develop, right? Using this system, you develop a new speak. You have to try to use it all the time because it's that daily repetition that builds the connections so that when you're under pressure and you try to use it, granted, it might not work well the first time or the second or the third, but eventually, as you use it under pressure, it will work. Why? Because you've been training yourself. You've been training yourself. And the connections are there. It's going to work. You're just training yourself how to use it in a different circumstance, in a real conversation or when you go to the store or whenever. But in order to do it, you got to do it, right? Principle of control says that you can control your speech. You can speak well, but you have to do some things beforehand. Okay? Principle of flexibility says that you feel freer. You have more options. You're more flexible, okay, when you have access to more than one way of saying or doing something, right? So the more options you have, the more options you look for, the more options you develop for yourself, the freer you're going to feel, the more flexible you're going to be able to be. Now, if you're not flexible and you don't look for any options, you're not going to feel free and you're going to feel like you're stuck. The third principle, which I'm just going to touch on a little because I'm going to go into this in another program that I developed, is this principle of relaxation. And I'm just going to give you one small tip real quick because we're running a little bit over our time, and this is just the first part of proactive speaking. We're going to talk about the second part in the next session, next week. This third part, principle of relaxation, says the more relaxed I am, the more smoothly and fluently and confidently I'll speak. I was working with some people just yesterday and the day before, and the more relaxed they start their speech, the better their speech goes. So here's one specific technique that you can use. Start slow and easy. When someone says something, wait from between 1 to 5 seconds. Usually it's 1 to 3 seconds. You pause. So I ask you a question, pause. At least 1 second. And then when you respond very slowly. Extend those first few words or phrases. So if I say, so what are you going to be doing tomorrow? Pause. Well, I'm not really sure. I might go out, or I might begin to do some homework. Notice, I paused, extended my words, paused, extended, paused, just took my, and then once you get going, once you get past those first few words, the first phrase, then you begin using your new style, that is inflecting, extending, and so forth and so on, that we talk about in the Pro 90D speech system. Okay, so what's another example? Let's say I need to ask a question. I might go, let's say I'm in a room or something and I want to get someone's attention. I might, go like this. I might go, hey, I've got a question for you. What time are you going to be able to come to dinner? Right? Notice how I've got a question for you. Right? So not just nice and slow, very relaxed. What I notice is that people tend to want to respond right then and there. If they have a question, it's got to come out right there. And they try to get it out all at one time. Extend those first few words and just relax. And somebody says, well, I can't even get the first few. If you tell yourself that you're going to extend, that you're going to relax, that you're going to ease those first few words out, eventually, and you practice doing it, eventually you are going to be able to do it. You are going to be able to do it eventually. When I say eventually, I'm not talking about months down the road. I've seen people do it in one session, just consistently be able to respond smoothly and easily in one session. And all they have to do is just practice that. It will come. It will happen. Okay? So we talked about 3 principles with regards to proactive thinking, which is a part of proactive speaking. We talked about the definition of proactive, meaning you do something before the situation happens. You don't wait and then be reactive, that is, respond to everything. You're proactive. 3 principles are what? One principle we talked about started with a C. It was principle of control. Yes, you can control your speech. You just have to do something beforehand. Principle of flexibility, which has to do with what? Options, having different ways of saying something. Yes, my name is Michael Williams, and my name is Michael Williams. It's nice to meet you. My name is Michael. I'm just using that as an example, right? Have different ways of saying something. Principle of flexibility. Third principle is principle of what? Relaxation. And the specific example that we used for that was how you get started, how you actually get started. You relax, you pause from 1 to 5 seconds. Usually it could be from 1 to 3 seconds. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds maybe. And you extend those first few words. And you do this every single time until you train yourself to be relaxed, and to not just jump in and just start going 1,000 miles an hour, right? Okay? So you train yourself to do that. I hope this has been helpful. I hope I gave you some specific actions that you can take with regards to introducing yourself, some specific ways for you to start thinking about your speech, like the wave doesn't stop, it's not bothered, it just goes a different way, and some specific ways to start off your speech in terms of being relaxed. Okay? In the next session next week, we'll talk about the second part of this, and we'll talk about proactive speaking. Just a couple of techniques with regards to proactive speaking, some of which we've kind of talked about today, but I'll go a little more in depth with 1 or 2 specific techniques. Okay? So if you have questions or comments, please go ahead and leave them. I'm not able to see them now, but I will see them in just a moment. This video will be available to you almost instantaneously once I'm done, and I'll respond to your questions. If you're not a part of my private Facebook group, go ahead and join that. I'm going to leave a link. And also, if you haven't taken or you're not taking the ABCs course, which is absolutely free, I advise you to take that. Even if you want to do the Pro 90D or the coaching, take the ABCs first. Also look at the 21 steps first, then do the Pro 90D speech system. And even then, I do that first, the speech system, and then if you want to do the coaching, then you have a greater foundation. You've been able to get the ball rolling. Okay? Thank you very much. This is Michael Williams, and I'll see you next week.